Today we're looking at another bingo reading board. So on the Broken Binding Club Discord, we were holding a discussion about different reading challenges. And one of our fantastic mods decided to make a custom reading bingo for our group. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Several different modes you can play with, and we'll look at the modes and the prompts here right after the intro. Welcome to the Book Dormer. I'm Michael. Thanks for coming. If it's your first time, thanks for coming. If you've been here before, well, thanks for coming back. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at one of the reading challenges that several of us are going to be doing in 2025. So first off, why a reading challenge? To me, it's simply incentivizing me to read the books that I might have otherwise skipped, or to help get me out of a rut. So if I go down the path of too many books that look too similar, sometimes it's good to just bounce to something else for a bit. So let's see what we've got going on. Broken Binding Club Bingo is a 5x5 board with prompts on each of the squares. So you got 25 squares, 25 prompts, and we got a whole different variety of modes that you can play on this board. So I'm going to go through them real fast, just kind of walk you through the modes that you can play. Mode 1, if you want to play this, and if you want to just look at it for ideas, that's fine too. Normal mode, 5 in a row. Vertically, diagonally, horizontally, doesn't matter. A true bingo, so yeah, 5 in a row. Hard mode, fill the entire board, but doubling up is allowed. So if you've got a book that fits first in the series, and there's a broken binding because you want to use the free space, and maybe it's an author you haven't read, yeah, it could count for all those. So again, one book can count for multiple squares. Then you have expert mode. That's where you fill the board with unique books per square. So that's more similar to what you see as a classic reading bingo. Then you have hardcore mode. That's where and this is, again, remember, this came from the Broken Binding Club, a fan-run Broken Binding group. Our hardcore mode in this one is only Broken Binding special editions. Now, if you wanted to play it on your own with whatever, let's say you do Lit Joys or Fairy Loots or whatever, you could certainly just change it up. But for me, you can kind of tell I like my Broken Bindings. So I'm going to be using the Broken Binding special editions. In fact, my plan is actually to take it a little bit further and to go after what I'm calling an extreme hardcore mode. That's 25 Broken Binding special editions, where each author only gets to be used once. So I'm stealing that, obviously, from our fantasy bingo. This might be a bad idea, but right now I've got enough that I can do this and focus on getting through 25 different authors in the year. Try to focus in on which ones I'd like to continue down their series and which ones are being stuck on the shelves the rest of the time. I'd say voted off the island, but let's be honest, they're staying on the shelves. But maybe not the focus shelves. Maybe they'll get the shelves over that way. It happens. All right, let's look at each of the squares. I'm going to introduce each prompt, and then I'm going to give what my current plan is for my likely choice. I was trying to see if I could do it with existing book purchases. I can do it for most. There's a couple in here I'm going to have to wait till new editions from Broken Binding show up, but it's close. All right, square one. The main character is a parent. Not a parent as in they, I see you. No, like they have children. Probably the best for this is Children of Gods and Fighting Men by Shauna Lawless. Book 1 of the Gale Song. I bought that off somebody, and I now have it, so I wanted to read it anyways. In fact, I was pretty much planning that for February. Others that would work. The Wolf Queen of Oren Yaro by K.S. Veloso. That's book 1 of the Chronicles of the Bitch Queen. It has another name too, because I think Chronicles of the Bitch Queen was not playing as well on some of the media. Different places to sell. And the upcoming Grimoire Grammar School Parent Teacher Association by Caitlin Rozekis would also work. Square 2, published in 2025. So note, this is that the book is published in 2025, not the edition that we're doing. Which always makes it a little harder. Right? Now, I've already bought, I think at this point I have 6 on order now from Broken Binding at this point. I'm leaning towards the purchase for tomorrow morning, which is Once Was William by M.R. Carey. Again, it's not here yet, so I might be delaying and waiting to see if other books arrive that look promising. Whoever wins, right? Sometimes the special edition world, you get to wait, and sometimes things get delayed. Square 3, 4 or more POV characters. I'm going to go with, right up there, The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. The Dandelion Dynasty 1. Square 4. Reread an old favorite that you have loved before. Note, this book doesn't actually have to be old. It's just something that you have read before. Now, I've got a few books that I've read in other formats, like I did the audio book or I did a paperback, and now I got the fancier one. So my goal for this, I'm actually aiming at The Deadhouse Gates by Steven Erikson whenever it actually ships. Apparently, Wave 1 is shipping. I did not get in Wave 1. So I'm having to wait a little bit longer for my Steven Erikson books. But Deadhouse Gates would be a really good one for that for me. Square 5. So finishing off that first row is a dragon on the cover. I've already finished Dragon Rider this month. So Dragon Rider by Taran Matharu. It's the Soulbound Saga #1. It's already read, so it already counts. In fact, it's counting on the bingo board over there too, our fantasy bingo board. Get them both. Let's go to the second row. Square 6, a new to you author. There's tons. This is actually maybe my favorite part about the Broken Binding is they find me books from authors that I wouldn't have otherwise read. But so far, I've been pretty trusting on their finds. Now, if suddenly I start on a streak and I don't like their authors as much, I'll probably be a little pickier. But so long as they keep going after backlist good series. Yeah. Broken Binding, I ran it today on the list I have, has 106 distinct authors. 107th if you count the one where there's two authors on the same book. I'm leaning towards Brian McClellan and his Promise of Blood, which is the Powder Mage 1, which is right back over there. Square 7, Set on a Ship. Now this could be space or boat. At this point, I'm looking at The Call of the Bone Ships by R.J. Barker, or The Tide Child 2. I did not particularly care for Tide Child 1. And so we may be seeing, I might start it and see if it works for me better. Because at the end of the Tide Child, the first book started doing better. It was painfully lack of anything going on for the first 300 pages. Square 8, a single word title. I'm leaning for Ascension by Nicholas Binge. There's several others that you can do. Ascendant. There's, there's a bunch of them. Just check the BB site. If you're doing that mode, and again, if you're just doing standard fantasy mode, you got a billion choices. Square 9, a door stopper. Now, what does that mean? We're saying generally it would be 500 pages for the average reader. So it's a big book. Adjust it however you need. I'm actually going to adjust it up to 800 because I tend to read a 500 pager every month. So that's not really shoving me into something. And so 800, I could go after that thing, that big old giant there. And a lot of choices. Oh, again, there's Perdigo Station by China Miéville. His name is rather difficult for my accent. Yeah, actually, I think I'm going to go for that one instead, which is hiding down there. It's off the edge. But China Miéville and Perdido Street Station. Square 10, first in a series. By publication order or chronological order. So many options here. I really wanted to get into and start the Tad Williams books, the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy. So that would be the Dragon Bone Chair. I was waiting till I got all 4. Just because I was finishing up some other reading plans on my TBR. But now that I've got all 4 of them have arrived, so I've got them now. I know it's safe to start in. Row 3. Originally written in a language other than English. But this one has an asterisk because if you are fluent in a language other than English, that one doesn't count. You need to get it written and translated into one of your languages. And it specifically says other than English. That way, sorry folks who are from around the world who are into the Broken Binding, you just don't get to choose any of them because they're all in English. At least all of them that we have here. I actually have ran into a little problem on this one because one of the other ones I would use for this, I have to do for another square. There's actually one square that only one book covers for me. So I'm actually going to do this one with the 3-body problem by Learn Te Shen, which is book 1 of the Remembrance of Earth's Past. Square 12, this is adapted to or from the screen or a tie-in. Now, any book adapted from movies, TV shows, any other media accounts, video games, tabletop role-playing games, podcasts, etc. There aren't a ton of options for me here. Three Body Problem would have been an obvious, but I just used it for the translated. So actually, that's the one I was going to aim at. The other book stopper over here, which is Exodus by Peter F. Hamilton. I think that is coming from a video game adaptation. The Martian by Andy Weir would be a good option if you had it. Square 13, read one of your Broken Binding books. This is considered to be a free space so long as you are already going to be doing a Broken Binding. For the rest of you, read a Broken Binding. Again, it's just for fun, right? If you want to change it out, change it out. But for us, read a book that you got from the Broken Binding. There are so many of them. For me, it's just a free square. So I was thinking it'd be like whatever sequel in the next series I was going to want to read. And I was talking about this, writing up little thoughts on, getting the bullets on what I wanted to read. And I remembered I had started Sunbringer already because the third book in that series is coming out. So Sunbringer is my choice for that. Hannah Kramer. Book 2 of, I don't know, what she, off the top of my head, I don't remember what she calls it. I'm calling it the Sunbringer series. Square 14, there's a spaceship on the cover. Now, any spaceship or any part of a spaceship on the cover. Not lying here, I'm actually hoping there's some new ones coming in. Because for now, the one I'm using is probably going to be World Walkers by Neil Asher. And whatever reason, he gets good ratings online. Goodreads, look at his ratings. He gets good ratings. That book sucked. Or the previous one sucked. It was just reptile brain references. I'm talking hundreds. You can look up the video where I made fun of it if you want to. It was astounding how many references to that one phrase was. So I'm really hoping that was just that book's gist, and he's on to just telling stories instead. World Walkers. Square 15 is a Grimdark. Grimdark, the bleak, the violent, the disturbing Grimdark. Right? People who want to do easier modes. And there's a ton of variations on what people would consider Grimdark. Some of these range from, oh my goodness, you are demented, to ranging down to there's bad things in it. Like, for instance, one of them on the lower end would be, First Law, which is funny. So a lot of people don't like it as, even though it's by Lord Grimdark, a lot of people like to rip on it as not being actually Grimdark because he's funny and he releases tension. The Black Company, the Second Apocalypse, the Black Tongue Thief. There are a lot of options here for TBB. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go for We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle, book 1 of The Last War. It was one of those series that showed up on a sell-off on Broken Binding's website. I went, oh, I'll buy it. And then looked it up and went, oh, it actually does sound like something I'd read. Another option would be Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Beelman. Again, there you may have some disagreements from certain people, but don't gatekeep. If you want to call it Grimdark, it's Grimdark. Why are we doing that to each other? Row 4. Let's go. Square 16 already. Hard sci-fi. So fairly reasonable or fairly plausible science. Now, the hard is a rough term, again, because you're going to have a lot of people who differ. There are some people in the sci-fi community who are like, I don't believe your science stands up to scientific scrutiny. Ergo, denied. Other people are like, hey, look, it has something in it. Looked like there was math. It counts. Again, choose your level. We'll allow either of these. With Broken Binding, there's actually still only a few. Some of the Andy Weir books, I think you'd have to argue The Martian, right? Considering he wrote that specifically about wanting to do the math. The Three Body Problem would probably count. Children of Time trilogy. So that's what I'm going to end up going with, is The Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Book 1 of the Children of Time series. Square 17, a standalone book. So anything that's not part of a series. I am kind of pot committed to doing How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, because my wife went to an event last night and got it personalized by Grady. So I kind of suppose I owe it. So that one's coming. Post 8, Square 18, post or post apocalyptic. So either you're dealing with the fallout of apocalypse, or you're dealing with the rebirth of society post-apocalypse, some sort of apocalyptic event. And yeah, ready for a hard one from TVB? At least as of January of 2025, I found one, just one, Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So thank you. I've got it. It came in, so I'm ready for Square 19, a non-human main character. At least one main character who isn't human. Again, I think you're actually seeing a limited scope of these. I'm probably aiming at Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, which is the Chronicles of Ostrith, book one. Another really good options would be the Legends and Lattes or Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. And who knows? Maybe if I'm looking for something gentle by that point, I'll just do the Bone Chops and Book Dust because it is smaller than Goblin Emperor. Square 20. Speaking of small, a novella or a short story. Now, a novella or whatever to you is a short story. It's part of an or as part of an anthology. For me, this gets hard because really the only one of these I actually own is The Shadow of Their Dying by Michael Fletcher and Anna Smith Spark. It's 172 pages. Depending on the genres that you tend to read, that might seem like a normal sized book. Sci-fi fantasy, probably tend to go larger books. So I'm going to count it for my 172. It looks tiny. I was actually kind of shocked it had that many pages. Last row. All right, we're almost there. Square 21, a single or a single person point of view. So either there is just one point of view character, one perspective that we get, or that the book is actually written in the first person point of view, which is I see this. And you talk about what you feel and what you see directly as from the character's perspective, right? It's the movie view of the world. There actually aren't a ton of these. I think I got to 13 in a little bit of research trying to figure it out. 13 overall. What I wanted to go for, though, is one I've been waiting to read. So Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. I've been told there's only one POV character. There are multiple characters, but only one gets the point of view. And if I need to, I'll just switch over to when it shows up from Thomas Pieties, Priest of Bones, when it arrives, because that's a single point of view the whole way through. Square 22, a cozy and or a romance. So a comforting story, like a cozy. And by the way, whether or not you want to spell in British English or American English, ZY, SY, still cozy. Sounds the same, so we get away with it. A comforting story, something with low stakes, or a story with the primary focus being a romantic relationship, which doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional romance, as in if you went to the bookstore, it doesn't necessarily have to have the happily ever after or the happily for now that the romance genre demands. It could be a story just focusing on romance. Like, I think the classic one I'd say that breaks that's still romance, would be The Notebook. That's not a happily ever after to watch somebody die in the hospital. Yeah. And so I think there's some pushback in that. I'm just going to go after the cozy. I've got two possibilities here. Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree, which I could do also for the non-human, and Dreadful by Caitlin Rozakis, who's making her second appearance on here on my list. So I can only use it once. Only once per author for me. Again, it gets harder here as we want to have 25 unique authors, and both of those authors work in other squares. How about 23? You want to talk about hard? Published before you were born. I don't know if you can see it. There's gray in this beard. So originally published before the day you were born. It can be the same year, but as long as it's before. For me, there's a whopping one that's available that's anywhere close. And that would be a book that was published in 1957, which is A Hero Born by Jin Yong, the first of the Legend of the Condor series, translated from the Chinese. That was what I was going to use for my language one, but we re-looked because, again, it's when it was first published, not when it was translated. I was like, oh, because it was translated after I was born. Yeah, old person problems. Square 24, horror. Any horror story. So Broken Binding, again, we only have a few at this point. You have horror movie, which some would say some of the humor. I'm really going to go for The Black Hunger by Nicholas Pullen. I think that's probably like that's from the Halloween box. I think that's going to be true horror. And then as they open up the horror sub that they're doing, partial, it actually gets sent out by Broken Binding. So it's from the same processing place as what my friends who got the other ones in. Because I was talking about like the How to Sell a Haunted House and then the new Grady Hendrix, which is, oh gosh, something of witches. The witch one from Grady Hendrix actually came from this other label, but it actually came from the same location. Mine was supposed to arrive yesterday and is now taking a tour of the states, apparently. Because apparently it took 3 days to come 10 miles. Square 25, a 5-word title, a book with a long title. You are in this one allowed to use thes. I decided it'd be fun if I tried to skip articles and find one that didn't have any articles to do it. And it goes right there. Scott Lynch. I used you in my our fantasy bingo for an alliterative title that had three letters, right? Liza Locke-Lamora. Did that last year. This year, Red Seas Under Red Skies. It counts. Gentleman Bastard #2. Let's go. That is my 25. Some final thoughts though before we get you going too far. Look, these don't ever let your challenges make reading a chore. It should be about fun. Now, sure, if you want to say to yourself, I want to read these books and I'm going to fight my way through them because I want to read that book, sure. But don't let like some external force, like trying to show off to friends, don't let that do it to you. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out with me.